Encounter, Chapter 1. Abend, Chapter 1. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, their rhythmic clatter cutting through the late-night hush of his cramped apartment. On the screen before him swirled a world far removed from his humdrum existence. Not the mundane code he manipulated by day, but intricate maps, cryptic riddles, and the fantastical creatures of his beloved Dungeons Dragons game. But tonight was different. His 3 online friends crackled through his headset, voices fueled by caffeine and the shared thrill of the campaign. They were deep inside the labyrinth of the Forgotten King, the climax of a storyline months in the making. It was Ethan's turn as Dungeon Master, and with a mischievous grin, he pulled his trump card. "Hold on, guys," he announced. "Let me just enhance this encounter a little." He tabbed out of the game, fingers dancing over a side project that had been consuming his evenings, an experimental AI designed to bring a smidge of real magic to their virtual world. His friends were used to his wild ideas by now. "Okay," Ethan declared triumphantly, hitting enter. "I invoke the arcane energies. Let's have a spell crafted for this moment." The AI hummed to life, spinning out possibilities on the screen. Ethan scanned them, and something unexpected caught his eye. It felt strange, almost out of bounds. "Ooh. Restore lost enchantments. Sounds ominous," he mused. "I kinda like it." "Dude, just get on with it," Mike groaned theatrically into the mic. "My barbarian is itching for a fight." Ethan chuckled, ignoring the warning bell at the back of his mind, and triggered the spell. The AI responded with a rush. Lines of code blurred, reconfiguring themselves into a pulsing vortex that leaked out of the monitor, filling his small room with an eerie light. Panic flared. Before Ethan could react, the vortex collapsed, vanishing as abruptly as it had appeared. The apartment plunged back into ordinary semi-darkness. Did something just happen?" Sarah's voice was hesitant, breaking the stunned silence. "Did my screen just glitch?" A buzzing filled Ethan's ears, an undercurrent of electricity beneath his skin. It wasn't just the game. Something had shifted. The air felt different, prickling and expectant. "Hang on." Ethan's heart pounded. Pulling up his webcam, he swung it to the window. Beyond the glass, the city lights blazed with an odd intensity. "Guys, I don't think this is a glitch." Chapter 2. The weight of neglect hung over Alex like a shroud. The silence in the cramped house wasn't the comforting kind. It was thick with unspoken resentment and the perpetual stink of stale beer. Her stepfather's thudding footsteps were replaced by the muffled sounds of the TV and the clinking of his bottle on the coffee table. Another night, another unspoken truce, another reminder she was barely tolerated. Her escape lay in the glow of the cracked laptop screen in her dimly lit room, not in the vapid social media feeds her classmates obsessed over, but in the shadowy corners of the internet. Tales of hidden worlds, forgotten power, promises of change whispered in dark forms, a flicker of hope. Dangerous, desperate, the kind that clawed at the heart of a girl trapped in an unyielding cage. The words burned on the screen. Rituals for the unseen. Alex leaned closer. It wasn't the usual wannabe witch stuff. This was about power, real power. Not over boys or popularity, but over her own destiny. There it was, a crudely written guide for transformation, the ultimate escape, becoming a vampire. Not the sparkly, brooding kind from the movies, but a creature of the night, unbound by the rules of ordinary humans. Alex's hands trembled. Fear warred with something raw and defiant. Her world had always been cruel, always unfair. This was a chance to seize control, become more than a victim. The ingredients were unsettling, but not impossible. A sliver of broken mirror, a drop of her own blood, the whispered words under the cover of midnight. Alex's pulse hammered against her ribs. It was crazy, insane. But the alternative, this slow decay of a life, was unbearable. The midnight hour crept closer. Her hands shook as she arranged the makeshift altar beside her bed. Her reflection stared back from the mirror shard, pale, insignificant. She squeezed her eyes shut and punctured her finger. The sting was nothing against the thrill of rebellion. The whispered incantation caught in her throat, scratchy and determined. For a breathless moment, nothing. Then, a prickling sensation washed over her, and the room tilted ever so slightly. Alex gasped, her eyes snapping open. Silence. The same cracked ceiling, the same oppressive air. Had it failed? Disappointment, bitter and heavy. settled in her stomach. It was foolish. Of course, magic wasn't real. Then, a faint hiss, like static. The laptop screen flickered, then erupted in a blinding flash. Alex screamed, flinching away from the sudden light. It subsided after an excruciatingly long moment. The room was cast in dim, blue light. The laptop was dead, but the glow persisted. It came from her hand. Her skin was shimmering with a strange luminescence, fading and pulsing like an erratic heartbeat. Fear clawed at her, twisting the thrill of power into something cold and alien. This wasn't right. This wasn't what she had expected. Stumbling away from the pulsating light, she crashed into the bedside table, sending her makeshift altar clattering to the floor. A sharp rapping on her door sent her heart skyrocketing. "Alex, you up this late? What's all that noise?" Her mother's voice, slurred and groggy with sleep. Nothing, Mom. Go back to bed." Alex willed her voice to stay steady. A grumbled reply, retreating footsteps. Alex sagged to the floor, relief washing over her along with a rising wave of panic. The glow on her skin was waning, but the fear remained. What had she done? The laptop screen, still blank, but somehow menacing in its deadness. She reached out a shaking hand, touching the cool glass. Before she could pull back, it flared to life again, not with its usual pixelated images, but with flickering news headlines. Breaking, global electronics malfunction, widespread reports of blackouts, emergency services overwhelmed. Her breath caught. The words swam before her eyes. Unexplained phenomenon, possible cyber attack. Alex tore her gaze from the screen, her room spinning. No, not a cyber attack. This was her doing. A sob tore from her throat. She hadn't wanted this. She just wanted escape. Not this. Then, a tinny voice filtered through the chaos on the laptop, almost lost under the panicked blur of scrolling text. Spells. Real magic. Anyone with an internet connection. Alex gaped at the screen. Spells. Real magic? Her heart hammered, the fear turning to a strange sort of fascination. She leaned closer, desperate to snatch more information from the frantic news reports. Instructions online. Simple rituals. Spreading rapidly. It wasn't just her. Others were trying this as well. A wave of desperate hope washed over her. Maybe she could find a way to reverse the effects, to undo whatever it was she'd started. Alex turned back to the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Search queries led her deeper into the internet's shadows, into hidden message boards now bursting with confused, terrified chatter. And among the panic, there it was. Instructions for spells of protection, of calming, even of limited healing. She scanned them hastily, the words swirling before her eyes. Not transformation, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way to manage this madness she'd unleashed. And within her stirred a flicker of a different kind of power. Not the darkness she'd yearned for, but a fierce determination to fix this, even if it cost her everything. Chapter 3. Chaos unfurled like a relentless wave. Within hours, the news was inescapable. Headlines screamed of power outages, transportation meltdowns, and a strange lethargy gripping people worldwide. Alex huddled on her bed, laptop flickering in the dim light, the curtains drawn tight against the perpetual night outside. Her social media feed was a maelstrom of confused terror, posts and videos of bizarre lights, objects floating in midair, cats levitating on command. The vampire transformation. It had only been the tip of the iceberg. Magic, real and untamed, had exploded into their world. Alex scrolled through messages from her friends. Sarah. Alex, what the hell is happening? Phone is dead, TV is fried, and my parents are freaking out. Mike. Saw a dude at the grocery store make all the oranges explode. It was kinda awesome. Fear mingled with a bizarre sense of vindication. This was her fault. Her reckless wish for power setting the entire world ablaze. She'd want to change, but not like this. Her eyes fell on a news article describing a strange new phenomenon. People were falling into a deep, unresponsive sleep, not coma-like, but almost as if switched off. The article speculated it was screen-related. Phones, computers, tablets, the devices that had become lifelines in the darkness were now conduits for something terrifying. A chill ran down Alex's spine. The glow on her hand had long since faded, but the memory remained. She looked around the room. Her laptop, the source of both chaos and possible solutions, beckoned her. But another screen flickered in the corner of her eye. The small, old TV her parents hardly ever used. The thought struck her like lightning. It was still working. No internet connection, of course, but for local news. For broadcasts, that was their only remaining window to the outside world. She scrambled across the room, her heart pounding in her ears as she switched the clunky thing on. Static, flickering images. Then, the haggard face of a news anchor appeared. Reports of this sleep spell, as authorities are calling it, are multiplying. Victims appear healthy, but unresponsive. No medical explanation. Alex felt the blood drain from her face. Her friends, her parents, anyone who had been glued to their devices trying to understand the chaos, they could be next. A frantic search yielded the same terrifying reports. People suddenly falling silent mid-conversation, slumping in the streets, dropping phones that had become conduits of darkness. Her parents. She had to get home. She couldn't let them fall victim to this spell. But outside, the world was broken. The familiar streets were now an unpredictable minefield of unleashed magic. Alex closed her eyes, breathing raggedly. She had to try. Slipping on her worn-out sneakers, she inched open her bedroom door. The house was silent. As she crept downstairs, she kept her eyes carefully averted from her stepfather's computer in the den, her mother's abandoned tablet on the kitchen counter. The TV in the living room was on, the news anchor's voice a terrified drone. She peered around the corner. Her mother slumped on the couch, untouched dinner plate still on the coffee table. Relief washed over Alex, followed immediately by a crushing wave of guilt. Then, her stepfather stumbled in from the hallway, uncharacteristically disheveled. He glanced at the TV, confusion and fear twisting his features. Then, he pulled out his cell phone, fingers jabbing at the unresponsive screen. Alex held her breath, her whole body tensing. Don't look at it. Suddenly, he jerked back as if bitten, dropping the phone with a curse. He rubbed his eyes, looking dazed, and slowly slumped onto a chair. Alex bit back a sob. She'd been too late. The weight of what she'd done threatened to crush her. But beneath the despair, a tenacious spark remained. They weren't gone, maybe not forever. There had to be a way to break the spell, to reverse this nightmare. She had to keep moving, had to try. First, she needed supplies. Food that didn't require electricity to cook, blankets, batteries for flashlights. Their usual emergency kit was useless in this new world. Alex cautiously rummaged through unused drawers and cabinets, her breath shallow in the silence, her every movement deliberate to avoid screens that lay in wait like traps. The street outside seemed eerily quiet, not the stillness of night, but a heavy, muffled calm. Alex hesitated at the door, fear battling a desperate urgency. She needed information, needed to know if there were others like her, awake, aware, fighting back. Deep breaths. Peeking through the blinds, she scanned the familiar street. A few cars sat abandoned, lights still blazing eerily in the unending twilight. Across the road, an old, boxy television flickered through Mrs. Wilson's window. Maybe someone else had thought the same. Slipping out, she hugged the shadows. The air felt different, denser, charged with echoes of the haphazard spells flying around. She flinched at a sudden shimmer from the bushes, the skittering of stray magic. Her heart tripped at the sight of a levitating garden gnome, but there was no sign of the neighbor who'd cast the spell. She reached Mrs. Wilson's house. The door was slightly ajar, a beacon of hope. Inside, the flickering TV newscast revealed the living room eerily untouched, except for the shape of Mrs. Wilson slumped on the floor, face bathed in the bluish glow. Alex knelt beside the elderly woman, checking for a pulse. Relief flooded her, steady and strong. The news broadcast must be true. Whoever succumbed to this sleep spell wasn't dead, just inaccessible. A sudden warmth spread through her pocket. Frantically, she fished out her old flip phone. It had been buried in a drawer for years. The display flickered on, faintly illuminating her trembling hands. It still worked. With renewed purpose, Alex started checking the houses up and down the street. 2 more sleeping neighbors, a frantic call to her grandparents who lived miles away. They, too, were safe, their ancient landline still stubbornly in operation. The pattern was clear. Electronics were the danger, and those too old or too remote to be consumed by them had been spared. Back home, Alex hunkered down in her dark room, surrounded by her meager supplies. The laptop was shut tight, a Pandora's box she refused to reopen. She had caused enough chaos. Now, surviving it, and finding a way to fix it, was all that mattered. Chapter 4. The days bled into a blurred twilight. Alex became a creature of the shadows, her movements calculated and measured. Every rustle was a potential threat, every flicker of light a trigger for a surge of frantic fear. The isolation was oppressive, the silence punctuated only by her own ragged breaths, and the frantic ticking of the wind-up clock she'd unearthed. Hunger became her biggest enemy. She raided the pantry, grateful for her mom's occasional bouts of old-fashioned stockpiling. Canned food, dry pasta, and the dusty camping stove became lifelines. But her supply was limited. Desperation gnawed at her. She needed more, needed to venture out further. Disguising herself in layers of clothes and using a kitchen knife as a makeshift weapon, Alex slipped out. The streets were eerily deserted. Abandoned cars, some overturned with their headlights still glaring, littered the roads. Broken shop windows displayed bizarre scenes, floating mannequins, a levitated cash register spewing coins. This broken world was a playground for unchecked magic. Every corner held potential danger. Alex learned to move stealthily, ears straining for the telltale hum of a spell being cast, eyes darting for signs of uncontrolled magic, a flicker in the corner of her eye, an object moving without a cause. She avoided people at all costs, fear coiling in her gut at the sight of anyone. Were they awake like her, or entranced, a potential new victim of the relentless sleep spell? One evening, shuffling through a deserted grocery store, her heart leaped at a sound, a muffled cry from behind a toppled shelf. Weapon raised, she crept closer. There, huddled on the floor, was a young boy, maybe 6 years old, tears smudging his face. Please. Help, he sobbed. My mommy is sleeping, and I don't know what to do. Alex hesitated, the weight of responsibility washing over her. Her own fear was immense, but she couldn't leave a child stranded and alone. It's okay, she said gently, lowering the knife. I can help. Helping him turned out to be a harsh lesson in the world's new rules. He didn't understand why his tablet wouldn't play cartoons, why the lights refused to turn on. To him, this was a broken world, not a magical one. Alex did her best, feeding him, finding him a warm blanket, and explaining in the gentlest terms she could that things had changed, and some things wouldn't work anymore. In the end, after hours of searching, she managed to locate his grandparents. A tearful reunion played out with gestures and whispers to avoid the ever-present, unseen danger. Leaving the boy in their care was both heartbreaking and necessary. She was alone again, a stark reminder that saving anyone but herself was a luxury she couldn't afford. Back home, Alex collapsed on her bed, sleep threatening to overtake her. But a nagging memory pried at her exhausted mind. The news reports flickering from Mrs. Wilson's television. There, amidst the chaos and fear, whispers of something else. Something about the magic fading, becoming weaker away from populated areas. Could it be true? Could there be a way to escape the reach of the electronics, the relentless sleep spell? In the depths of her despair, a desperate, reckless hope began to flicker. Chapter 5. Hope was a fragile flame, but for Alex, it was the only fuel left to keep her moving. That flickering news report, half forgotten in the panic of the early days, gnawed at her mind. If the darkness was tied to cities, to the tangled web of electronics, then maybe there were places where the magic was weaker, the sleep spell less potent. A plan began to form, hazy and dangerous. She needed to get out of the city, far enough for the magic to weaken its hold, far enough to find others unaffected. Others searching for a way to undo this catastrophe. Alex scavenged with renewed determination. She packed a backpack with her meager supplies, adding the old compass her grandfather had once taught her to use. Her parents' rarely used hiking gear became her armor against the uncertain wilds ahead. The dusty road atlas became her most precious possession. One moonless night, she slipped from the house like a shadow. The streetlights, once beacons of familiarity, now cast grotesque, elongated shadows that stretched and danced with the echoes of uncontrolled spells. Fear was her constant companion, but she pushed it down, focusing on each step, each measured breath. The first few miles were an endless blur of tense movement and whispered prayers. Then, slowly, subtly, a shift began. The air felt less charged, the constant low hum of magical interference fading. Fewer lights blinked and whirred in the distance. It was working. With every mile, a strange sense of liberation crept over Alex. The darkness that held the world hostage was loosening its grip. The weight of constant vigilance began to lighten, replaced by a cautious optimism. Days turned into a grueling trek. Alex scavenged abandoned houses for food, avoided major roads, and slept in snatches, hidden in dense underbrush or crumbling barns. The isolation was both terrifying and empowering. In this topsy-turvy world, she was beholden to no one, bound only by the dictates of her own survival. Then, one afternoon, a glimmer of something different pierced the twilight gloom. A hand-painted sign, leaning against a tree, its message weathered but clear. Haven, food and shelter, 2 miles north. Alex hesitated. The promise of safety battled with a gut instinct honed by weeks of solitary survival. But hunger gnawed at her, and the loneliness was eating her from the inside out. Taking a deep breath, she followed the makeshift signs. They led her deeper into the woods, the path becoming increasingly overgrown. As her heart thrummed with anxious anticipation, a clearing opened ahead. It was no grand fortress, but a collection of mismatched tents and hastily assembled shelters nestled amongst the trees. Smoke curled from a central fire, the smell of cooking food a tantalizing punch to her nostrils. Several people moved about, not entranced victims, but alert, purposeful individuals. Alex froze, her hand tightening on the knife at her belt. Then a worn-out woman noticed her. Her face, lined with worry but softened by surprise, broke into a careful smile. "Well, look who we have here," the woman said gently, Are you lost, child? Alex swallowed against the lump in her throat. The words tumbled out in a rush. I saw your sign, and the magic. It's weaker out here. I think I can help. Her jumbled plea was met with a thoughtful silence, then a flurry of confused questions. The camp's inhabitants gathered, their faces mirroring a mix of skepticism and desperate hope. Alex faltered, then, in a trembling voice, explained what she knew. The vampire spell gone wrong, the cascade of global chaos, the sleep spell linked to electronics. The heavy silence fell as she finished. For a long, tense moment, the gathered people simply stared, digesting the weight of her words. Then, an older man stepped forward, his voice rough but carrying a note of authority. You know about the magic, how it came back. That's more than we got. Name's Thomas. Got any proof for all this? Alex dug in her pack, pulling out the old, cracked laptop. A low gasp rippled through the crowd. Gingerly, she opened it. Though the internet lay dead, there were still files, traces of her desperate searches the first night. News articles, spell instructions, whispered warnings on the darkened forums. The proof was undeniable. The initial distrust turned to fascination and a flicker of excitement. These people had survived, found ways to live without the comforts of the modern world. But Alex, she offered something different, the possibility of understanding how this had happened, and maybe, just maybe, a way to reverse it. Tentatively, they led her to the fire. A bowl of simple stew was placed in her hands, and the conversations flowed. Alex learned of their haphazard escape from the cities, the trial and error attempts to adapt to a world without electricity, the growing despair as the sleep spell took more and more of their loved ones. She, in turn, shared her experiences in the heart of the chaos, the flickering news reports hinting at others like her, others who knew the truth behind the magic's return. As the fire crackled and darkness settled around them, a sense of purpose sparked in Alex's chest. She wasn't the only one. It was a threadbare hope, but stronger than any she'd known in weeks. So, Thomas's gruff voice cut through the quiet. These news reports you mentioned. Talk of others waking up to the magic, right? Others like you? Alex nodded slowly, a plan taking shape in her mind. If I can find more of them, maybe together we can figure this out. Fix it. Stop the spell from getting any worse. And what about all the folks already asleep? A young woman asked, her voice sharp with worry. You gonna wake those up too? Alex looked into the fire, determination hardening in her gaze. We have to, she said, voice low but unwavering. We have to wake them all up. Chapter 6. Haven became Alex's base camp, a rough-hewn community clinging to survival in the outskirts of a world gone mad. The people there treated her with a mixture of cautious awe and genuine gratefulness. Her knowledge, however fragmented, made her their most precious resource. Her days took on a new rhythm. She taught the camp how to avoid the sleep spell, how to sense the erratic currents of magic, and how to ration their dwindling supply of batteries and fuel. In return, they taught her the basics of wilderness survival, foraging, fire building, and tracking. The nights were filled with whispered discussions around the fire. Alex, Thomas, and a handful of others who'd shown a knack for understanding the strange new rules of their world huddled together, piecing together scraps of information. They debated the nature of the unleashed magic, experimenting with tiny, controlled spells, a flickering candle, a pebble made to hover for a few seconds. Through it all, a name drifted through Alex's mind like a half-forgotten song. Ethan. She scoured news reports, looking for any sign of another young person at the heart of this magical catastrophe. Was he out there, burdened by the same guilt, desperately seeking a solution? One day, a weathered man named Caleb arrived at the camp. He had journeyed on foot for weeks, his face etched with tales of ravaged towns and encounters with those who embraced this broken world, using magic for power and violence. But Caleb also brought invaluable news, a beacon of hope piercing the gloom. Out east, he told them, there are rumors. A gathering, they say, of people like us, who understand. They have a plan, a way to fight back. Alex's heart quickened. Not just scattered survivors, but a coordinated force. And somewhere within that force, maybe, was the answer to waking up the world. And maybe, just maybe, there was Ethan. Despite the danger, she knew she had to go. Haven needed a lifeline, a connection to those rumored fighters. And amidst the guilt and responsibility, a flicker of longing burned in her. If there was even a sliver of a chance to find someone who understood the same burden, it was a risk worth taking. With a small group of volunteers, including the stalwart Thomas and the determined Caleb, they set out. Their journey was arduous. They faced unpredictable magic, dwindling supplies, and the ever-present threat of those who had turned feral fueled by uncontrolled power. The road was long, the future a perpetual question mark, but amidst the fear, a flicker of excitement warmed Alex. This was more than just survival now. This was about finding answers, about fixing what she had broken, As they crossed into unfamiliar territory, the buzz of magic grew fainter. They found fewer sleeping victims, more people huddled together, living simple lives, an echo of the old world. It was in one such village that a girl with haunted eyes and a voice barely above a whisper brought them the news they desperately craved. The gathering was real. It was in the heartland, hundreds of miles ahead, at a place now known only as the Sanctuary. And the whispers that filtered back from the east spoke of a plan so bold, so impossible, that it reignited the spark of hope they all thought lost. A way to undo the sleep spell, to awaken the world. Sanctuary was less a place, more a sprawling network of hidden communities stretched across the vast emptiness of sparsely populated land. It was an underground society built on defiance, a beacon in a world drowning in darkness. It wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming humanity's future. Here, Alex found others who understood, who shared her knowledge, and bore the same burden of guilt. But here, too, she found a strength and a resilience born from resistance. These weren't just refugees. They were engineers, mechanics, coders, the forgotten makers of the world, now banding together to forge a solution. Her nights were filled with whispered strategy sessions, huddled over salvaged tech, and piles of half-understood spellbooks. Alex's mind raced, absorbing everything. They theorized, experimented, failed, and started again. It was messy, dangerous, and utterly invigorating. And then there was Ethan. He was older than she expected, worry lines etched on his face, the spark in his eyes dimmed by a weariness she recognized all too well. Yet, his brilliance shone through. If Alex was the one who'd ignited the flame, he was the one who understood its potential and its danger. Their connection was almost instant. It wasn't just the shared experience, but a desperate, unspoken need for absolution that only another caught in the same storm could provide. He didn't blame her. In fact, guilt radiated from him in waves, making her own feel less like a crushing stone and more like a shared burden. Together, they pored over Ethan's AI, his experimental spells, a mad tapestry of logic and ancient incantations. Each failure brought them closer to something resembling a solution. Amidst the chaos, a sense of something fragile and vital began to grow, blooming tentatively between stolen hours of sleep and frantic brainstorming sessions. More than allies, they were becoming anchors for each other, a lifeline in the maelstrom of their shared responsibility. One night, as they sat hunched over a flickering oil lamp, Ethan paused, his voice rough with exhaustion. Alex, the news you brought about the sleep spell weakening outside the cities, that was the missing piece. What do you mean? She asked, a tingle of anticipation running down her spine. I think, he began, then ran a hand through his unkempt hair. I think we can turn the entire world into a haven, make the magic fade, weaken the spell until it no longer holds our friends, our families captive. Alex's breath hitched. You mean, wake everyone up? He nodded grimly. It would take a spell powerful enough to reach across continents, fueled by. His gaze flickered to the AI, something beyond my ability alone. The AI. Alex felt a chill. Its power was still a terrifying unknown, but perhaps it was the key, a way to undo what she had wrought. Can we even control something that powerful? She voiced the fear that gnawed at her. Ethan met her gaze, a flicker of determination sparking in his tired eyes. We have to try, he said simply. We have to. Chapter 7. A hush fell over the sanctuary. The news of Ethan and Alex's plan spread like wildfire, igniting a mixture of fear, excitement, and a desperate, fragile hope. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was a chance to reclaim the world, to drag their loved ones back from the darkness. The preparations were monumental. The AI, once a plaything, was now the focus of intense scrutiny. Teams of engineers and coders worked tirelessly to unravel its secrets, searching for a way to harness its power without unleashing another devastating wave of uncontrolled magic. Alex, meanwhile, was pulled into the heart of a circle of those with magical inclinations, healers, seers, and practitioners of obscure, forgotten arts. Their task was more esoteric, weaving spells of protection, of balance. To try and mitigate the potential backlash of their audacious plan, they scoured ancient texts, chanting forgotten incantations and brewing strange potions in the dim light of secluded huts. All the while, scouts brought in disturbing news from the outside. Strange creatures, barely recognizable as human, were emerging, beings twisted and warped by their prolonged immersion in uncontrolled magic. Their presence grew bolder, drawn to the concentrated power of the sanctuary. It became clear that time was running out. The day of the casting dawned, gray and bleak. An eerie calm had settled over the sanctuary, Every able-bodied person had a role, from those powering the makeshift generators to those weaving shields of protection around the epicenter where Ethan and Alex would work their desperate magic. A platform had been built, ringed with ancient stones and humming with hastily carved runes. Alex took her place beside Ethan, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her chest. The AI crackled with an energy that prickled her skin. Ethan's hands danced over the makeshift control panel. Lines of code flickered across a cracked screen, intermingling with archaic symbols scratched into makeshift tablets. It was an impossible mix, a testament to the desperate gamble they'd chosen. Alex reached out to the circle of spellcasters, felt their trembling energy flow into her own. She began to chant, an ancient incantation of balance, a plea to the universe to accept their offering, not reject it. The words pulsed around her, the air buzzing with a power that filled her with a mix of dread and exhilaration. Ready, came Ethan's ragged whisper. He met her gaze, a flicker of something she didn't dare name passing between them. Then he hit enter. The AI surged to life, not with the hesitant flicker of before, but with raw, unrestrained force. Alex gasped as tendrils of pure energy snaked across the platform, connecting to the runes, feeding into the network laid out across the sanctuary. The chanting intensified. The stones hummed, the ground beneath them vibrating with barely contained power. Alex clung to her incantation, her voice rising above the maelstrom. Suddenly, a wave of energy slammed into her, a force unlike anything she'd known. The world spun. She screamed, not in pain, but in the overwhelming intensity of the surge. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, it was gone. Silence. Then, a gasp. A shout. Alex blinked, her head spinning. Across the vast network of the sanctuary, people were stirring. Figures blinked and groaned, shaking off the heavy weight of the sleep spell. Loved ones cried out in recognition, children laughed, a cacophony of dissonant sound washing over them. They had done it. It had worked. But amidst the elation, fear gnawed at Alex. The AI pulsed erratically, its light a blinding, unstable glare. Then, from the horizon, came a chilling answer, dark shapes flitting across the sky, converging on their exposed position. The creatures of corrupted magic, drawn to the epicenter of the spellcasting. Chapter 8. Triumph curdled into a cold knot of fear. The sanctuary, abuzz with the joy of awakening, now faced a new threat. Exhaustion hung heavy, resources were thin, and they'd unleashed a beacon that drew the corrupted creatures like moths to a flame. Alex looked at Ethan. He was pale, a flicker of despair in his eyes. Yet determination tightened his jaw as he turned back to the chaotic AI. Can you see and you shut it down? Alex's voice was strained. I don't know, Ethan admitted, his fingers flying over the makeshift keyboard. It's different now. I barely understand what we just did. The first wave of the corrupted creatures descended, grotesque parodies of humanity, eyes burning with manic energy. The hastily organized defenses of the sanctuary met them, makeshift weapons, newly awakened fighters still dazed from their long sleep, and bursts of controlled magic from those who'd honed their skills over desolate months. The clash was savage and brutal. The creatures, fueled by the lingering power of the spell, wielded a terrifying strength. But the sanctuary fought with the desperation of those who just won back their world. In the chaos, Alex's senses were on fire. The ebb and flow of magical energy thrummed through her, a constant threat on the edge of her awareness. She weaved between the defenders, casting what small spells she could, a shield for a weary fighter, a blinding flash to distract a leaping creature. Then, she saw Ethan. He was exposed, back turned to the battle as he furiously manipulated the AI's controls. A creature, larger and more deformed than the rest, stalked towards him, oblivious to the carnage, drawn to the flickering pulse of power. Ethan? Alex screamed, but her voice was lost in the roar of the fight. She lunged forward, a desperate gamble forming in her mind. Drawing on every ounce of her connection to the magic, she wrenched it into a cruelly focused beam, aiming at the creature. It faltered, turning its grotesque head towards her. With a roar of rage, it changed course. Charging, Alex held her ground, channeling all her fear and fury into the crackling beam of light. The creature slammed into her, the impact knocking her off her feet and sending a blinding wave of pain through her body. She gasped, scrambling against its twisted form. But the spell held, searing into its flesh. The creature screamed, a sound that pierced Alex's skull. It writhed, then abruptly went still, collapsing in a cloud of ash. Breathless and bruised, Alex pushed herself up. Her gaze snapped to Ethan. He was staring at the spot where the creature had disintegrated, eyes wide. He met her gaze, and something like understanding passed between them. The raw power they had unleashed wasn't just in the AI. It was inside them, changing them, making them into something new. They didn't have time to dwell on it. The fight raged on. Alex turned, meeting the charge of another creature. But as she raised her hands, something felt different. The magic thrummed within her, not just a tool, but a part of her. With a surge of defiant energy, she unleashed a blast stronger than anything she'd managed before. Around her, others seemed to be experiencing the same shift. People newly awakened from the sleep spell were fighting back, their fear mingled with a surge of raw power. The creatures, facing a unified force, began to falter. Slowly, the tide turned. As the last of the corrupted creatures crumbled, an exhausted cheer rose from the sanctuary. But through it all, Alex's eyes remained on Ethan. Their shared secret hung heavy between them. The power, the change, and the unspoken fear that this was only the beginning. In the aftermath of the battle, there was no fanfare, only the grim work of caring for the injured and the numb weight of those lost. Amidst the hollow relief, Alex and Ethan sought each other out. Drawn together by their shared burden, they stood in the wreckage of the platform, the AI, a smoking, inert husk. The air crackled with leftover energy, but the heart of that terrible power seemed to have burned itself out. "Can you—" Alex began, her voice hesitant. "Did you feel it too? The shift?" Ethan nodded slowly. There was a hollowness in his eyes, a weariness that ran deeper than exhaustion. "We didn't just wake up the world, Alex. We changed something. In ourselves, in everyone." Fear gnawed at her. Had they created more monsters, simply of a different kind? Was this uncontrolled magic now woven into the very fabric of humanity? "What do we do now?" she asked, the question echoing in the silence. Ethan turned toward the horizon, where the last remnants of darkness were being chased away by the rising sun. The world was awake, but to what they had wrought, none could guess. "Rebuild," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "Learn, and this time, we control the magic, not the other way around." They returned to the heart of the sanctuary, not as heroes, but as humbled architects of a new, uncertain reality. It was a world teeming with magic, brimming with both the potential for greatness and the threat of destruction. Alex found herself the focus of both awe and wariness. She was the girl who had broken the world, then helped mend it, but now there was something undeniably different about her. The magic wasn't just around her anymore, it pulsed within her. In quiet corners, Ethan and the engineers pored over the remains of the AI, seeking to understand the catalyst of change. Alex joined the seers and healers, delving into ancient knowledge, searching for a way to harness this power, to guide and teach others the skills of this new magic. Their bond, born of guilt and shared purpose, deepened into something else, a hesitant trust, a flicker of affection battling against the weight of the unknown. There was no space for the innocent yearnings of their former lives. The world had shifted, and so had they. Late at night, when the sanctuary slept, they would find each other under the vast, star-filled sky. There, surrounded by silent fields and glowing stones, they practiced. They pushed against the limits of the magic coursing through them, and limits of their own untested hearts. The days turned into weeks, then months. Survivors trickled in, drawn by the rumors of a place where magic was understood, even controlled. The sanctuary became a school, a fortress against chaos, and a beacon of a fragile hope. Alex and Ethan were its heart, bearing the weight of their creation with both grim determination and a yearning for a different future. For in the end, their greatest magic wasn't in their ability to alter the world, but in the tenacious, very human hope that they might yet teach it to heal. Chapter 9. The weight of responsibility pressed on Alex and Ethan. They were no longer children playing with forces they didn't understand. They were the reluctant guardians of a world in flux, the only ones with a grasp of the wild magic they had helped reintroduce. The sanctuary swelled with new arrivals. Despair had turned into hope, and that hope drew people from across the land. Healers eager to learn ways to focus their talents, fighters seeking an edge, and those simply wanting to understand the chaos they'd awakened into. Alex found herself teaching, sharing the fragments of knowledge she had painstakingly pieced together. Her classes were a hodgepodge of trial and error, ancient texts interwoven with hands-on demonstrations crackling with unpredictable energy. There were flashes of brilliance, moments of frustrating failure, and an undercurrent of tension as raw power thrummed through inexperienced hands. Ethan delved into the technical side, dissecting the AI's remnants with a haunted determination. His work took him into a realm only he fully grasped, a world of algorithms and logic gates entwined with arcane diagrams. The more they understood, the greater their burden grew. They discovered an uncomfortable truth. The magic coursed through the world itself now, woven into the very fabric of reality. The electronics, the conduits of the sleep spell, had acted as a catalyst, but the damage went deeper than a temporary malfunction. One evening, as they sat by the remnants of the AI, Ethan confessed his fears. "Alex, we didn't just reintroduce magic. We destabilized everything. This isn't like learning to harness electricity. It's like the world itself has become a volatile engine, and we're the only mechanics. Alex felt a chill run down her spine, but underneath the worry, a stubborn determination surged within her. Then we learn. We adapt. We teach others to do the same. We can't put the genie back in the bottle, Ethan, but we can choose what to build with its power. Their evenings stretched into long theoretical debates. How does one regulate, guide, or even limit such an intrinsically chaotic force? They sought inspiration from the aged texts, discovering tales of bygone eras where magic was commonplace. One night, nestled among moldering scrolls, Alex found a reference that flickered with exciting possibility: spells of binding, rituals crafted not to manipulate, but to instill a sense of natural order into raw power. Could this be the key? Not control, but a guiding hand? Fired with a sense of urgency, they threw themselves into the work. The sanctuary became their laboratory. Together they developed a delicate web of carefully constructed spells, woven with Ethan's technological understanding and Alex's instinctual grasp of the world's newfound energy. The experiments were fraught with risks. They tested the spells first on inanimate objects, then carefully on animals, and finally, cautiously, on volunteers within the sanctuary. The results were unpredictable, sometimes spectacularly unsuccessful. Yet, through each stumbling step, they honed their theories and inched closer to an understanding of this new magical reality. Their biggest challenge was in scaling up these spells. An enchantment that imbued a small pebble with order was a far cry from influencing an entire city, let alone the world. For that, they needed a conduit, a way to blanket vast distances with their carefully controlled magic. Chapter 10. Ethan's AI lay in ruins, but the concept behind it, the ability to broadcast information on a vast scale, sparked an idea, a desperate gamble born from necessity. They delved into the sanctuary's salvage stores of old tech, piecing together a makeshift broadcasting system. Towers of scavenged antennas rose around the sanctuary, a strange contrast to the ancient runes etched upon them. Alex led the spell weaving, channeling her knowledge and power into rituals to amplify and project their meticulously designed enchantments. And finally, they were ready. Alex stood beside Ethan as he hesitated, fingers hovering over the cracked keyboard that would serve as their beacon. "We don't know the effect this will have." Alex's voice was barely a whisper. "It could amplify the chaos, unravel the very balance we're trying to build. Or," Ethan countered, an unfamiliar steely resolve in his gaze, "it could be the start of something new, a way to teach the world to control this, instead of the other way around." They looked at each other, connected by the immense risk they were about to take. Then, together, they hit enter. The makeshift system hummed to life. Alex felt a surge of energy flow through her, siphoned into the runes, and amplified out through the antennas. For an agonizing moment, nothing. Then, a ripple shimmered across the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. Miles away, in a small village, a woman attempting a healing spell for the first time felt the energy stabilize in her hands. A boy levitating a rock for fun suddenly felt an invisible guide, making the stone float steadily instead of spinning wildly. Across the land, the change was subtle yet profound. News trickled back to the sanctuary. The chaos was easing, the frantic edge of the magic fading as people subconsciously began to grasp the new rules. With every report, the tension coiled like a spring within Alex and Ethan began to unwind. Their gambles seemed to be working. Over the following weeks, they refined the broadcast spell, the world becoming their classroom. It was erratic, unpredictable, but progress nonetheless. They sent out instructions, warnings, and carefully measured pulses of the stabilizing spell that continued to nudge the world toward a precarious equilibrium. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex stood beside Ethan, gazing at their network of towers. They'd done it. Not perfectly, not with the clean certainty of science, but with the messy, flawed determination that was so intrinsically human. "We changed the world," Alex murmured, a flicker of awe in her voice. Ethan turned to her, a weary smile gracing his face. "For better or worse?" He paused. What now? It was a question loaded with unspoken possibilities. They could retreat, build walls around the sanctuary, let the world find its own way. Or they could be something more, the architects of this strange new reality. Alex met Ethan's gaze and saw the reflection of her own relentless determination. Reaching out, she gently clasped his hand. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, of shared purpose, of a bond forged in adversity, and a cautious hope that bloomed amidst the ashes of their mistakes. "We teach," she said, her voice stronger now, carrying the weight of their shared experience. "We build something that lasts. It's time to write a new manual for the world, a guide to the age of magic." Chapter 11. Their broadcast system, once a desperate gamble, evolved into a lifeline. It became a platform for not just stabilizing spells, but for knowledge, warnings, and the slow, methodical construction of a shared understanding. From the heart of the sanctuary, their voices reached out, a blend of Ethan's logical explanations and Alex's instinctive grasp of their new, magical world. The sanctuary swelled, transforming into an academy of sorts. The focus shifted from mere survival to education, experimentation, and the development of a collective wisdom to navigate this uncharted reality. Apprentices were mentored, libraries of both technical and ancient texts expanded, and teams were dispatched to distant lands to share knowledge and monitor the ever-changing state of the world's magical equilibrium. Alex and Ethan were at the center of it all, yet not above it. The burden of responsibility had tempered them, etched lines of worry on their young faces, yet also forged within them an unshakable resolve. Their partnership transcended the romantic possibilities that lay nascent beneath the pressure of their mission. They were neither lovers nor merely colleagues, but something new, bound by a shared creation both magnificent and monstrous. And they weren't the only ones changing. As the world adapted, so too did the nature of the magic within it. The daemons, once grotesque and powerful, began to dwindle. The wild surges became less frequent. People learned, adapted, the initial chaos giving way to a strained coexistence with the unpredictable forces they had unleashed. Yet, the danger wasn't gone, merely subdued. Alex and Ethan understood that the stability was precarious, the peace hard-won. In secret, they continued to research, searching for a way to not just manage the magic, but to find a true balance, a way to permanently mend the broken foundations of the world. Their quest led them down a path filled with whispers and half-forgotten legends. The notion of a spell so audacious, so fundamental, that it held the potential to reshape the very foundation of reality. It was a flicker on the edge of possibility, a promise whispered through the ages, the spell of ages. The mere idea sparked a dangerous sort of exhilaration. Was this the ultimate answer? A chance to finally undo their mistake, to restore what was carelessly shattered? Or was it yet another path leading to even greater destruction? The information was maddeningly incomplete. Hints lay in crumbling scrolls, in the ravings of ancient seers, in coded messages etched onto lost artifacts. Piecing it together was akin to reconstructing the blueprint of the universe itself. Nights were spent poring over indecipherable texts. Weeks were lost on journeys to forgotten ruins in search of clues. Their shared obsession fueled them. It also formed a wedge between them and the world they had helped rebuild. They grew secretive, isolated, bound by a goal almost too immense to contemplate. One day, as they sat hunched over a particularly stubborn riddle, Ethan let out a frustrated sigh. "This is madness, Alex. We're chasing a myth, a whisper, while the world we helped mend could still unravel again." Her hand, tracing the crumbling letters on the ancient paper, hesitated. He was right. The cost of their obsession was becoming clearer with every passing day, but the lure of that impossible spell, the whispered promise of a true fix, was still a powerful temptation. "We may be chasing a ghost," she admitted, "but what if it's our only chance to set things right? To truly make amends?" A troubled silence fell between them. The weight of their unspoken choices hung heavy in the air. Their lives had become an intricate dance of duty and obsession. Days spent teaching, mentoring, stabilizing the chaos, followed by nights lost in their desperate pursuit of the spell of ages. The lines blurred between noble ambition and the dangerous hunger for a magical solution that might simply not exist. Alex broke the silence, her voice tinged with a weariness she could no longer hide. "I know the risks. Honestly, I am terrified. But Ethan, if there's even a chance to mend the tear in the world, to restore what we took, isn't it worth chasing?" Ethan stared at the cryptic text in front of him, his jaw tight. "And what if we make it worse? Unleash something even more devastating in our desperation to fix the past?" He looked at her, a flicker of desperation in his eyes. "Can we live with the consequences, Alex? Are we strong enough?" It struck Alex then, how young they still were beneath the burdens they had shouldered. This wasn't about playing with powers they didn't understand anymore. This was about deliberately tempting fate on a cosmic scale. Decision settled like a stone in her stomach. "We gather what information we can," she said finally, her voice firm. "Then we present it to the council. It's too big a choice for just the two of us. We've led them this far. Let them help us weigh the burden." The council, a group of the sanctuary's wisest and most experienced, had become their advisors, their check against reckless ambition. Presenting the fragments of their knowledge, the risks and the potential rewards, meant a relinquishing of control, an admission that they were no longer children playing at magic, but leaders burdened by its immense consequences. The meeting was tense. Ancient faces lined the council table, their gazes pinning Alex and Ethan with a mix of trust and wariness. They presented their findings, their fears, and the tantalizing promise of the spell of ages. A hush fell. Then Caleb, the weathered wanderer, broke the silence, his voice rough but steady. You've shown us a path, more dangerous than any we've taken yet. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Alex's. But can you walk it without being consumed by it? That's the question only you two can answer. That night, under the vast, star-strewn sky, the true cost of their quest washed over them. What began as a desire to fix a mistake had spiraled into a hunger for power. Cloaked in the noble veil of salvation, Alex looked up at the glittering expanse above, feeling not wonder, but a crushing weight. She turned to Ethan, seeing her own doubts mirrored in his gaze. Can we do it? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft rustling of the fields. Can we chase this spell for the right reasons, without losing ourselves? Ethan took her hand, his grip stronger than she expected. Not alone, he said. Not anymore. But together, with the council, with the sanctuary, maybe the spell, the change. It's too big for just the two of us. Understanding blossomed between them. It wasn't just about the potential of the spell, but about themselves, about their capacity to carry the burden it represented. The lonely road of obsession was no longer an option. It was time to walk a different path, shaped by transparency, shared purpose, and the acceptance of their own limitations. Chapter 12. In the weeks that followed, the search for the spell of ages became a communal undertaking. The sanctuary hummed with a renewed energy, tempered by caution and awareness of the precarious balance they played with. Teams of scholars were formed, their mission to meticulously comb through the collected fragments of knowledge. Healers kept watch for any signs of corruption or strain in those who dared delve into the deepest mysteries. And at the heart of it all was Alex and Ethan, not as solitary figures consumed by their quest, but as guides, their choices tempered by the council, their spirits buoyed by the shared purpose. The romantic possibilities that had shimmered between them dulled, replaced by something less fragile, but no less potent, the deep bond of comrades facing an impossible task together. One moonless night, a breakthrough came. A cryptic inscription, discovered on a crumbling temple wall and translated with heart-pounding intensity, yielded a critical piece of the puzzle. It was a concept, not a precise spell, a way of weaving magic not to alter reality, but to resonate with its fundamental structure. It's not about force, Ethan breathed, his eyes wide with startled comprehension. It's like finding the right note, the hum at the heart of the universe. The implications were staggering. This wasn't about unleashing another chaotic wave of power, but about nudging the world, guiding it towards the inherent order it had lost. The image of a broken instrument, painstakingly retuned, sprang to Alex's mind. The final preparations took months. The council debated endlessly, weighing the immeasurable possibilities against the soul-crushing risks. It was in the stillness of her modest quarters that Alex discovered her true resolve. Yes, the spell was a chance to undo their sin, to right their greatest wrong, but more importantly, it was a way to honor the magic itself, not as a tool, not as a weapon, but as an intrinsic part of the fabric of their world, deserving of respect, understanding, and a guiding hand. The casting day arrived, blanketed in a sense of solemn inevitability. The entire sanctuary gathered in a vast open field. Alex and Ethan stood upon a raised platform, surrounded by the council members. There were no triumphant banners, no celebratory cheers. Instead, a hushed silence descended, broken only by the whispering breeze. Alex took a steadying breath. This wasn't about personal redemption anymore. It was about a collective choice, a gamble for a better future. She closed her eyes, reaching out not to the chaotic, crackling energy she had once wielded like a blunt weapon, but to the subtle undercurrents of the world's reformed magic. It was a thrum, deep and steady, a discordant symphony yearning for harmony. Ethan's voice flowed beside her, interweaving with hers. They invoked ancient words, not as spells of command, but as echoes of a universal language. The council joined, their voices a rising chorus. The air shimmered. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to resonate in response. Then, in a breathless cascade of light, and a sound that was more felt than heard, it was done. The world didn't jolt, didn't explode. A subtle shift occurred, a sigh of realignment so gentle it could have been missed. Yet, Alex felt it deep in her bones, a sense of balance, a lessening of the relentless tension that had thrummed since that fateful day she'd first unleashed unchecked magic. In the days that followed, the change became undeniable. The random surges of power stabilized. The frenzied glow that had tinged the world dimmed. It was an imperfect peace, but a peace nonetheless, proof that they had not shattered the world again, but nudged it ever so slightly back onto its axis. Finally, Alex and Ethan looked at each other, the weight of years falling away. They smiled, not with the carefree joy of children, but with the weary satisfaction of those who had crossed a vast desert and reached an oasis. Their work was far from over. The sanctuary remained a beacon, the magic still a volatile force, but amidst the ruins of the past, they had sown the seeds of a future a future where magic and humanity could coexist, a blend of science, ancient wisdom, and the eternal human desire to understand the extraordinary forces that shape the world around them. They turned and walked away from the platform, hand in hand, no longer saviors, no longer guilty architects of a broken world, but simply two people, irrevocably changed, ready to face whatever the magic-infused future held. Years blurred the edges of the legend, but the story never truly faded. Alex, the girl who broke the world, and Ethan, the boy who helped mend it, became figures whispered about in hushed tones, both revered and feared. Yet, their legacy wasn't about personal glory, but about the enduring legacy they built together, the sanctuary. It evolved from a haven into a true city, a beacon of hope in a world still grappling with its newfound magical nature. Its walls held not just classrooms and laboratories, but sprawling gardens where the art of magical botany was honed, hospitals where healing incantations were refined alongside traditional medicine, and great halls where people of all walks of life gathered to debate, create, and learn. As the world continued to heal and adapt, the most powerful magic wasn't found in grand spells or earth-shattering rituals. It lay within the ordinary people who learned to weave the subtler energies into their daily lives. A blacksmith imbued his forge with a touch of fire magic. A weaver strengthened her thread with an enchantment of resilience. A farmer coaxed a greater yield from her crops with a song of growth. The dangers didn't fully vanish. Creatures born of chaotic energies still lurked in the untamed wilds. Pockets of instability erupted, and the hunger for power gnawed at some hearts. But the knowledge painstakingly gathered by Ethan, Alex, and the Council of the Sanctuary provided a crucial defense against those threats. Alex and Ethan, older now, their weathered faces etched with the wisdom of their unusual lives, became the heart and soul of the city. They taught, they mentored, and they never stopped learning. Their partnership, no longer burdened by the desperation of the early years, blossomed into a quiet love, built on mutual respect and the shared understanding of their entwined destinies. Their most important work, however, began far away from the grand halls and humming classrooms. Leaving the sanctuary in the capable hands of others, they would embark on long journeys. Across the lands they traveled, Alex, with her intuitive understanding of the new magic, sensed the balance of the world, soothing lingering disruptions and leaving behind beacons of stability in remote villages. Ethan, with his intricate knowledge, helped develop simple devices to monitor and manage local magical fluctuations, making the unpredictable just a little less dangerous. One starlit night, atop a wind-swept hill overlooking a valley filled with twinkling lights, Alex turned to Ethan, moonlight etching the smile lines around her eyes. "We did it, didn't we? The world, it's different, but it endures." Ethan reached for her hand, the love in his gaze mirroring her own. "And it will keep changing. It's in the nature of things. But we left a guide behind, a way to learn, to adapt." His thumb gently brushed over a scar on Alex's temple, a fading reminder of those desperate, early days. "That's the true magic, I think." They returned to the flickering lights below, their home, and as they walked, they became mere figures in a vast tapestry. Children played in the streets, their laughter infused with the faint echoes of spells. A traveler arrived at the city gates, seeking knowledge and shelter. In the grand library, a scholar bent over an ancient tome, the scratch of her quill echoing the same thirst for understanding that had driven Alex and Ethan years ago. For in the end, their greatest feat wasn't reversing their past mistakes. It was proving that magic, like humanity itself, was a force capable of both breathtaking beauty and terrible destruction. It was the endless, flawed, ever-evolving cycle of creation, adaptation, and the relentless pursuit of understanding. And with the seeds their actions had sown, perhaps the world, changed and scarred as it was, had a fighting chance to find its own extraordinary balance. Thank you for listening to my first story. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It's a dedication to Zoe, my love, my muse, my life. Thanks, everybody.